this is
good to go.
First slide. Okay. And can I start now?
Yes, we can see the screen well, and we can hear you very well as well.
Okay. So I'd like to introduce Japan's effort towards global harmonization of marine plastic monitoring. So Japan's willingness in contributing to the solution of marine plastic pollution is often not really visible for the international communities. Maybe we are like quiet people. So that this is a good opportunity to show the bridge and how international community can get Japan's effort involved. And also that I hope this could be the good case study of how to harmonize the monitoring method of an example marine debris variables to be an essential variables to support global indicators. So last year, Japan hosted the G20 meeting in the city of Osaka in Japan, so where the leaders of 20 countries discussed the common visions on the topics which included global environmental issues. Among the outcomes of the meeting was the Osaka Blue Ocean Vision, in which they promised national and collaborative efforts to reduce the additional pollution by marine plastic litters to zero by 2050. So this is another high-level political push towards the solution of marine debris problems. Then in the follow-up meeting of the Osaka meeting, which was focused on the scientific technology-based solution, the Japan and the European Union and the USA declared a joint initiative to take a voluntary lead for the achievement of Osaka Blue Ocean Vision. So, for example, Japan's tasks are harmonization of monitoring and data compilation. So that meant Japan pledged the support and the resources, provided resources in promoting this bridge. So as you know well, the GESAMP, they published the comprehensive guideline for monitoring and assessment of marine plastic here. And also there are many other guidelines for specific type of plastic and were among the regional foresight, like you can find these among the ocean best practice repository. So like, you know, European effort and Whale-Messer in Africa, in Westpac, in Asia and North. And these guidelines compare the analysis, pro and con of existing methods, but the harmonization of the methods to be able to enable global comparison with data is still under progress. So with this background, and also before the G20 Osaka Blue Ocean Visions, the Environmental Ministry of Japan started the project for harmonizing microplastic monitoring methods. So experts were invited internationally to discuss how to design the series of field and laboratory comparison of the methodologies for sampling and sampling analysis. The outcome was published as a guideline here, the guideline for harmonizing ocean surface microplastic monitoring method. So this is also, you can find this also in Ocean Best Practice repository. So anyway, this is an initiative of the one small country, and also one project cannot deal with everything about the marine plastic issues. So this project specifically put the focus on microplastic. Then also the selection of the method to compare was made by reviewing the existing monitoring guidelines, including the GESAMP report, and also the NOR, the UNEP, etc. Then basically they took the lower hanging fruit strategy because of the limited resources and picked up the surface microplastic monitoring by a net sampling as a target. So this is in terms of the global availability and in terms of the cost effectiveness of the method and also the extent of the existing best available data taken by that method. So in this project, the potential biases and variances of the data, which are derived by the selection of the conventional methods, and sampling and also analytical methods and the level of the human scale examined for field monitoring and laboratory analysis. So for example, for the field sampling, the data of Mantatro and the data taken by the Mantatro and the NewsOnet were compared. And also the influence of wind speed and current speed and the position of the towing, the pitch side and side tow and the behind tow, and also use of the mesh size, different mesh size are compared. Therefore, comparison of the laboratory analysis, the 12 laboratories of the 10 countries joined this project. So the standardized microplastic sample, the same microplastic samples, which included the non-plastics in a certain ratio, were sent to those 12 laboratories. And the influences of the plate treatment, such as the removal of the biofolding and the density separation, and also the level of personal scale on the microscopy were examined. And here are some examples of the recommendation based on the comparison in this project. So there are some good implications, such as, for example, like Mantatro and the NewsOnet data can be comparable. And also the small fishing boats can use these nets to collect good data. This is very important when considering we have to think about the capacity development of the microplastic sampling in all countries. And also, an interesting thing, important thing is both field sampling and also the laboratory analysis that suggest that the threshold, one of the thresholds of microplastic size is 1 millimeter for obtaining good, if not perfect, but the good data using the cost-effective, less time-consuming method. Then back to the Japanese bridge for the Osaka Blue Ocean Vision. The Japan, besides the harmonized monitoring, then also Japan also provide to take the lead of data compilation for the microplastic analysis and microplastic research. And Japan is ambitious to be a global hub to collate and comply the global microplastic data metadata for everyone use. And again, there are already many data portals which are open to public in the world. There's some are for specific delivery, and some are for more comprehensive information, and some are very policy relevant. And on the other hand, Japan's data hub concept will start with compilation of surface microplastic. Again, so very focused microplastic, and although it may not be limited to that in the near future, but it start with surface microplastic data. And its initial target user are scientists rather than the policymakers. And the quality control and classification of data will be made based on the recommendations of the guidebook, so that the users can use the data for scientific analysis in basin to global scale. Then the expert advisory committee will soon be organized to identify data policy and format and the procedure to compilation of the global data. So this is a roadmap of establishment of the marine plastic data hub that the Japanese government is thinking about. And I'm not sure about the details and the timeline of this roadmap because I borrowed this slide from the officer of the Ministry of Environment of Japan. But one crucial things in implementing this plan is to obtain an endorsement of the relevant international bodies, because Japan will be ready to provide resources, including the money, the personnel, and also infrastructure to promote it. But a single country project cannot just ask the international community to share your data. So I hope joining this workshop, Japan's joining this workshop and other similar workshop and also the dialogue, opportunity of the dialogue, and keeping to promote. It's helpful to promote their. I mean, Japan's global data hub idea. So now I introduce Japan's effort towards global microplastic monitoring. Then in the rest of my presentation, I would like to elaborate the possibility of surface microplastic information such as abundance and mass to be the valuable, useful features useful for global marine litter indicators. And I'm going to borrow the information and the recommendation of the session 2 toward the standard sampling protocol featured held in Monday. So among the example of the possible most relevant indicators for global scale monitoring here, this is a possible example, and here and microplastic is a floating and sediment shortlisted. So this recommendation is made based on a detailed analysis of the readiness level of its monitoring and analysis. So on the other hand, there are a lot of critics that knowledge gap is too large and the readiness level in this methodology is still lower in microplastic compared to, for example, the macro debris. So let's see its potential against the criteria for the good global scale variables, for example, like essential ocean variables. So I would like to clarify, I would like to clarify the terms or definition of variables versus indicators again. So here I would like to use surface microplastic information as a variable rather than indicator. So that this is a variable to measure, not to indicator itself, but may contribute to the development of the indicators. So the accumulation of the scientific knowledge of microplastic, including technical innovation and the impact of the ecosystem, is exponentially, getting larger in this, particularly in this recent years. So also the harmonization of the sampling and the laboratory analysis have been well progressed, and a feasible monitoring method recommended, as I showed early in the early slide. Here, so it's not perfect, but it's in good progress. And also, there is an opportunity of the data hub offered by Japan here. So there seems like a very good chance. So then how about the spatial and the temporal coverage to be the global essential ocean variable? Okay, then this is the data coverage of the surface microplastic. So there are more than 7,000 data taken by the net towing. So these data are more or less comparable. Those data are available between 2000 and 2019. But still there is a large spatial gap to global cover to cover the global, the level. And the good news is the number of observation is increasing in recent years. And most monitoring may be still opportunistic, not like a really, the routine observation work, but many programs, regional programs, and also the programs like a JAMSTEC, including JAMSTEC, start or plan to include surface microplastic as a routine observation item, one of the routine observation items. And also the regional alliance such as GOOSE, GRA, and also the UNEP's NOPAP, and also IOC Westpac can play an important role as the data collectors and providers. And also, I won't forget the European regional project too. And also the role of the integrated marine debris observing system emitters, maybe in coordinating such regional effort is much expected. And sorry, yet. And that an issue is that most of the monitoring effort of such the regional program are done in the coastal areas. So how can we fill the gap, the data gap in the open sea? Here, the old open sea. Then, so I can see the big opportunity in collaboration with the pleasure boat community, pleasure boat community and other ship of opportunities. So in January, the IOC and the International Sailing Community, IMOCA, officially announced their teaming up in marine scientific researches. So they may initially consider the climatic data and the physical ocean data, but the surface microplastic sampling is possible too. And there have already been many examples of the microplastic sampling effort and done by sailing boats. For example, the Ocean Race and the Bendy Grove and the X Expedition, shown here. So they are capable for collecting offshore data in global scale too. And many international yacht races such as Ocean Race and Bendy Grove are held in every couple of years. So another very good advantage in collaborating with the sailing community is that time series data are potentially available. So of course, the indicator has to indicate the temporal change of the something. So the temporal data, time series data is so crucial to obtain. Then, of course, we have to note that the sampling by such a racing yacht became possible only by use of the ship underway or semi-autonomous samplers, look like that. And these samplers enable the continuous sampling with minimum handling time. The method for rapid and cost-effective analysis of the sampling taken by such ship underway sampling is still in progress at this moment. So this is one example. But still, and this technology will be available soon for free. The last but very important thing is to harmonize the data taken by net sampling and also ship underway sampling like this. Okay, finally, I think we must think about what surface microplastic information can address. So, as already pointed out, the surface microplastic collected by the net sampling may represent only a small fraction of the whole plastic in global ocean. So that we must recognize that abundance and mass of surface microplastic is just a proxy of the global extent of plastic pollution. And to show what it implicates to marine environment and the ecosystem using scientific evidence obtained by additional variables is a scientist's job. So here, let me show an example in using surface microplastic concentration as a proxy of its impact on the ecosystem. So this is the recent paper. This is from the recent paper of Professor Isobe. So he reviewed the papers on laboratory-based analysis on impact of microplastic on marine organisms, such as plankton and fish and shellfish, and assumed the microplastic concentration of the larger than 1,000 milligram per cubic meter as the critical value for possible harmful effect of microplastic on marine ecosystems. And he compared that critical value in the model output of present ocean and the ocean of 50 years later. So you see the temporal and also, in the longer term temporal, the seasonal and seasonal variation and the possible impact of microplastic on the marine ecosystem, and also it's a spatial distribution. So at present, the value is lower than here. It's lower than the threshold anywhere in the world ocean. But please note that the threshold is over that value in 50 years later. But and also please note again, the surface microplastic concentration can represent only the fraction of the entire microplastic in the ocean. So we can, what's happening in the future in the inside of the ocean. So here I would like to conclude my talk with an optimistic message. So the question was, can surface microplastic information such as abundance and mass be valuable for global marine debris indicators? Then my answer is yes, can be. It can potentially be marine debris essential ocean valuable, which provide supplemental data for global marine debris debris indicators such as a state indicator and either state indicator or the pressure indicator. And thank you very much. This is the end of my presentation.
Thank you very much, Sanaya. I see we have a few comments and questions in the chat. First of all, we have Francois Galgani commenting that European Commission for its mission Healthy Oceans under Horizon Europe Framework Program will be happy to contribute such an initiative and be associated to it.
May I give some explanation or very quickly?
Course.
Yeah, okay. So, I mean, we do have a new framework program starting early next year, January, and that will be funded at the level of 90 billion euros for the next 10 years, all topics for research. And part of the budget will go to dedicated missions, and one of the missions will be on ocean. And as part of the mission board, I can tell that we already discussed, the support from the European Commission to such an initiative. And I think that on the principle, we are okay now. And so we have to discuss how to do and how to even to fund, possibly, and to organize the things. But I think that, our intention is also to go to more global than just what we did already within MSFD. So we will be happy to link with any initiative. And I was just, thinking to answer Matthias Jones, his questions about maybe it could be nice to have a meeting to merge all initiatives and intentions together for that. That's my feeling. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So just let me clarify. So you're talking about the initiative of making a global hub for microplastic data?
No. In fact, our intention is for global monitoring of marine litter. The mission board. So the part of the next European Framework Program. We'll be happy to discuss that, even to participate. And in that program, Global Monitoring of Monitor, I think we have, we'll be happy to have to support initiative from Japan. Why not? There is no problem with that. It's just to have something like coordination of global initiatives, even involving International Hydrographic Organization. Why not? It's really open from our side. But I think it must be under UNEP, but we'll be happy to, having something practically starting. I think it's time to do, to go in that way, that direction. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the clarifying. That is very good news. I can take the question myself, and I'm looking at oh. Maybe I lead. The next one is, so how to be sure that concentration are comparable between manta trawls and the sailing platform?
Well,
yeah, this is
for the microplastic, it was automatic correction. Sorry for that.
Yes, of course, size range is different between a sample of the manta trawls and the sailing microplastic taken by the sailing microplastics. For the sailing, ship underway sampler usually collect the smaller microplastic, like smaller than 300 micron. And on the other hand, the manta net collect normally the particle larger than the 300 microns. So that we think we need to collect the data with both sides and enough data to compare both methods. And hopefully, doing that sampling at the same time, just like what Japan did for comparison of the manta trawls and Houston net. And we hopefully to obtain some good the algorithm to estimate compare the estimate from the smaller particles concentration from the data from the larger particles taken by the net sampling. So of course this is just just a random idea. So we need to get we need to have a lot of idea, collect a lot of idea, good idea for the harmonization of these two methods through the dialogue, like the discussion like this. And this is very long. Okay, speaking as the Secretary General of the International Hydrographic Organization on behalf of 93 member states, I would like to know if you would welcome an initiative to assign National Hydrographic Office of the ITO members to regular duty microplastic monitoring. Oh, this is probably, this question is probably beyond my expertise, but I would like to, that Japan's initiative.
I could give a bit more background on that. Is that acceptable?
Yeah.
Or?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks. So this task attempts to create global time series according to standardized method. That reminds me very much on the core duty of hydrographic officers. Bathymetry is very, very similar, and we are absolutely accustomed to work on standardized series to use seabed topography. Our member states run the infrastructure, survey vessels, fixed and floating measurement units, and we all likewise have a crowdsourcing initiative and framework in place for the provision of depth soundings and bathymetric information. So I can really see that this could be an acceptable extra duty for hydrographic officers. This network is in place. What we are lacking, of course, is the expertise in measurement and technology, but that could be a perfect match between science and blue engineering and the perfect support for the ocean decade, as I see. That's exactly what we want, to bring this sort of knowledge into action. We look forward to assembly of the IHO in only 6 weeks time, and I can bring forward that to my member states, but I need, of course, the backup and the support of the scientists for this sort of ideas. So if you have better ideas how to span a regular monitoring network, so then let me know. But I still believe that hydrographic offices would be ideal to do that. This will not grow overnight, of course, as you can imagine, but the potential is there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is very good, very good news. And the important thing is, if we can, this collaboration of, is possible with IHO, then we must make sure the standardized sampling method, the analytical method, so that we can effectively use those important data and in the comparable. So again, so the cross dialogue, I mean, the keeping the dialogue communication is very important. Thank you very much. Okay. And there are some, but could I continue this, or maybe should be back in later all the presentation finished? How do you think, Arthur?
So I think Alex's point is very good, but it dives very deep into maybe a broader discussion point. So if we could ask Alex to hold on with responding to that into the second part of the session where we focus on the discussion, that would be great. Is that okay with you, Alex?
Yes, no problem.
Okay, then the next one is I have from the Thomas Mills, and I have the feeling that several similar activities ongoing to make a dashboard and overview of the data initiative, and we would benefit from mapping them. Yes, definitely. Also avoid the duplication and improve collaboration. Who is the best place to create such overview? Yeah, and definitely, I totally agree. We must avoid the redundancy, and we have to effectively use limited resources. So we need to collect all the information of the similar activity and the planning. So I think one of the good framework. So the purpose of this session is to identify the framework to make this possible. So one of the good framework is this is about the about the monitoring and observation, and maybe the images could be the one of the framework. But if talking about the more data oriented and or more policy relevant oriented, we may need the different framework. So we would like to talk about in the discussion session what kind of framework we need to for the good collaboration in a cost-effective way. And the last one is Crystal Smith, and at least another skipper will help for such observation. That's great. And let's take a look. Let me take a look later. Yes. Thank you very much. So I want to pass my mic to the next presentation. And is it Heidi available now?
Yes, ready to go.
Okay, so I think the author will show your presentation slide.
Yes.
So
okay,
Heidi, so is that what you prefer, that I flip the slides for you?
Yes, please. I think that will be the best.
Okay, no problem.
Given the challenges yesterday with sharing from UNEP computers, that would be great. So I wanted to take us back a little bit, like a step, to look at the whole issue we're discussing from a bit higher viewpoint, and that's going through a bit what's happening in the global arena and regional in policy responses and processes. So if we go to the next slide, please. Then in 2017, UNEP was asked to look at what is the situation with frameworks and governance approaches at both global and regional levels. And some of these findings included reviewing a number of global and regional instrument types. And of course, the findings is that there's no legal instrument with marine litter as primary objective. There's no global institution with specific mandate to that. And there are no international targets for reduction of marine litter, whether it's volume, impact, or timeline in any way. And that the situation is quite fragmented, where there isn't a good coverage of the issues associated with marine litter. If we go to the next slide. It also looked at the regional level, where we have the regional CIS conventions. These are, of course, very important instruments. They unfortunately do not cover all the countries in the world, so there is, of course, an obvious gap there. But there are, these are platforms where there is an opportunity to work on the issue at regional levels, and where there is mandated, there are binding conventions, there are protocols for land-based sources. And there are also, at the time, in 2017, there were already 10 adopted marine litter action plans, with a few in progress. If we go to the next slide, please. So UNEA took note of this in 2017, this report that we prepared, and moved towards a mandated establishment of an ad hoc open-ended experts group. So this is a group looking at what is the global situation, and what kind of potential response options would be relevant for UNEA to consider in further work going forward. So it started in 2018, and it was extended the mandate in 2019. So there have now been 3 meetings to date of this experts group, with the mandates continuing from 3.7 and 4.6 resolutions. And we were asked to do also a stock taking. So who's doing what and where, acknowledging that this is a very busy space. Who is doing what, where is enough happening, where are things not happening perhaps. Also identify technical and financial resources and mechanisms. So what is available within which areas of life cycle, for example, or source to sea, are there technical and financial resources and mechanisms available? To promote partnership approaches in addressing a lot of various issues, and then to look at the effectiveness of response options and doing that analysis, and present them as part of the ad hoc open-ended experts group in its 4th meeting, which was postponed earlier, which will now be held in November 9th to 13th, is to really look at what are the options that will go forward, potential response options for UNEA 5 for their consideration. The group does not have a mandate to look at whether things would be legally binding or voluntary. It's not within the mandate of the group. Of course, there is a lot of discussion still outside the group where many different countries have different positions on that particular approach. We were also asked to look at more strengthening coordination and information. So tomorrow I'll present more on the overall digital multi-stakeholder platform that is supported by the Global Partnership for Marine Litter and the Science Policy Business Forum. And that will have a close link to the World Environment Situation Room in the long run. We were asked to build on existing initiatives, and we've started doing some pilots with IBM on the integration of data from various sources, how to use artificial intelligence in facilitating access to different knowledge, and various other aspects. So I'll present on this tomorrow, and that will cover also a lot of the discussions I've heard now on different dashboards, etc. We are trying to develop something where a lot of different resources can fit in, whether that's through APIs or through code development, and also various type of partnerships from strategic to tech to data and so on. Something that's key in this whole discussion comes back, of course, to the need to strengthen scientific and technical knowledge. So we're underway with an assessment on sources, pathways, and hazards, which is going out now today for the 2nd review. And we've also been working on inventories also for environmentally sound technological innovations, especially asking us to support how to reduce risk of discharge, and recommending indicators like Gillian mentioned in her presentation yesterday. So we have a scientific advisory committee that is supporting some of this work, and we also are trying to locate and map where there are science advisory initiatives. So if you are aware of any, we of course know a few, but it would be very helpful to get that information. If we go to the next slide, please. In parallel, there's a lot happening again at the global levels, with the Basel Annex Amendment entering into force next year, with the development of the International Maritime Organization Action Plan, and at regional levels, various regional aspects from G7, G20, ASEAN, EU, and also now we have 12 regional CIS action plans that exist, with 4 drafts being prepared in the Northeast Pacific, in the Abidjan Convention area, so that's southwestern and Central Africa, in the Arctic, and also in the Caspian. So some of these are ongoing initiatives where monitoring and indicator work is highly important, and where the existing indicators within the SDGs are not necessarily covering everything that's relevant. If we could go to the next slide, please. So I'll just run through some slides quickly on what some of the information that we've captured through this stock taking exercise that we did. So who's doing what where. And this was based on different approaches where we had a submission through a survey, but also narrative submissions, where we used what we call the G20 template, where the G20 did a bit of an inventory also amongst the relevant countries. And we extended that one and got a lot of submissions. So next, and before I move to next slide, this stock taking is leading, for example, to 2 products, one dashboard where you can play around with the findings of this, which should be online by next week, and one project database. So if we go to the next slide, please. Then we had about 220 actions submitted via the survey, where you can see the location of actions here. This was from various entities, governments, UN entities, major group stakeholders, intergovernmental organizations, and others. So if we go to the next slide, please. We also had 63 submissions via the narratives. So that's the G20 narrative template that I mentioned, where also as many as 26 member states shared submissions. If we go to the next slide, please. So the types of actions that were documented, almost 17% were related to monitoring and analysis, but also a considerable amount was related to legislative and standards and development of rules. Technology processes was a bit lower with 15%, and working with people, 44% almost. So if we go to the next slide. Most of the actions that were reported on targeted macroplastics. Maybe macro is a bit easier to work with, and I think the discussion we're having on microplastics is very important in terms that I think it could fill a bit of a gap in especially some regions where microplastics isn't something that is at the moment the focus that the monitoring is occurring for, which within. And in terms of specific items, there were a few more packaging, and frequent sectors were related more to food, beverage, packaging, tourism, and fisheries. In the narrative submissions, there is work done at the national levels, looking also at especially bans, some work done within waste management, and then some references to circular economy, EPR schemes, and so on. If we could go to the next slide, please. Within the legislative standards and rules, so again, I'm tying this back to what is happening at the national level with policies, because many policies are also created without necessarily have the data to back up the necessary actions. I think the example of the EU is a very good, where they actually had good information on what are the top 10 items, and then acted accordingly in identifying our response options. A lot of what we're seeing around the world has less information to back up the necessary policies, but which makes it harder then to assess the impact of the policy or regulation in any way. So we have a good amount of legislation and regulations that were shared with us, but quite a lot less related to financial incentives that were shared in this stock taking survey. If we go to the next slide, please. And here I think you can see a bit of an overview. So with monitoring and analysis, which is the softer blue at the end of each graph, you can see that it varies quite a lot what was reported to us, and looking at the focus within different regions, where from this submission, which is of course a snapshot in time, then there would seem to be a bit more reported, at least to us, on monitoring analysis within the African region, whereas there is a bit higher work or more work ongoing in Western European and other groups, which is what the green here, it's WEOG, it's a UNIP group. And if we go to the next slide. Then the type of policy frameworks are related a bit more on that there is work ongoing on legislation, policy, standards, rules, strategies, There are more national frameworks that are dominating here in the reporting information, and that there are about 1/3 of the submissions report on fiscal incentive and disincentives. Again, we see the trend here that banning a product is the preferred way to go in many areas. If we go to the next slide, please. So tying it back to indicators and monitoring. So from our side, we have been requested to support the development of action plans at different levels, both regional and national. And looking at the SDGs and the various indicators associated with them, then we have identified that there are a few that are highly relevant to the work on marine litter, both under SDG 12, looking more at production, imports, use, and life cycle, under 11 and 12 with waste statistics, under 6 with monitoring of freshwater and wastewater, and then the monitoring of coastal and marine water. So we think that all of these areas are very important, and that there are good opportunities for indicator development that are almost between this, or that are linking them. In addition to this, we support countries then to compile and data along these lines for SDG reporting, and also parallel do a policy review to look at if the relevant policies are in place to support the findings of, for example, priority products or priority sectors and so on, and then support the legislation and advocacy in taking that information further. If we go to the next slide. In addition, there's been a lot of work on pathways, accumulation zones, and flows of waste. And of course, there are many groups working on this. So there could be also very nice, as was discussed before, on how do we promote synergies, and how do we make sure that the different models and the work that's ongoing, how does that fit into each other's? That's something that we see as a key role for UNEP to try and facilitate that discussion, and maybe bring together different groups. But of course, there are many actors that are needed in taking something like this forward. And then the last slide is just highlighting that what we've been asked to do also by governments is to provide advice on the prioritization of activities upon request based on the best available scientific knowledge and the most environmentally sound, risk-based, and cost-effective measures to prevent and reduce marine litter microplastics. And that ties back to, I think, the whole discussion on the short, medium, and long term. So what is it? How can we best provide guidance in policy development and action in the short term? What are the priorities there in the medium term and in the long term? And I think that's an area where we could discuss further, also based on the white paper that we'll be discussing more in detail tomorrow. This is the white paper on data-related aspects on marine litter. So I'll end with that, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Heidi. We would take some questions, and there's so far no question in the chat, and you can just raise the hand or ask a question. No specific question?
Yes, I do have a question. François Galgani speaking.
Yeah, yes, please.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I think that we need probably somewhere a scientific group to coordinate, harmonize, analyze the data and so on. So I understand that there are many different initiatives at the moment, but having only one, not only one, but I mean one main group to coordinate, such as for, I mean, the GIEC for climate change, for instance, just following all the science and the results for monitoring and so on, will probably support, I mean, not only global monitoring, but then the policy measures then.
Yes, there is some, thank you. So there are some suggestions in the countries have been submitting potential response options in the lead up to this ad hoc open-ended experts group. And there are some countries that have proposed that something like that be considered. The group is an expert group, so they wouldn't have the mandate to kind of decide anything, but that would be potentially, depending on the discussions in November, it might be something going forward to onwards to UNEA, and UNEA would be the ones deciding something like that. If
Okay, thank you.
And any other question and comment? Oh, one of the comment question from Thomas. A UNEP science expert group to guide data quality and assessment, which would be good to avoid a different outcome in the end?
Yeah, I think the coordination aspect of any such group would be an important aspect to kind of make sure we're driving in the same direction, everyone, and that all the valuable work that's being done by different groups, that there is a space for how that feeds in and really translate into policy action, which is at the end of the day, I guess, what we need to achieve based on the best available scientific data and information.
It's a comment from René. Too many acronym anyway. Yes, I agree. For better communication, we have to reduce the use of acronyms.
Yeah,
anyway, just like a policy of the
yes, we can all agree on this.
Especially that between us in France, we use different acronyms, of course, because they have a French translation. So sometimes we are lost. That's why I said GIEC, which is a French way to say the intergovernmental, etc., IPCC in English. So it's really confusing.
Yeah, thank you very much. So if there's no other the comment and the question, we should go to the next presentation of Arthur. Arthur, could you please get your presentation ready?
Yes, thank you, Sanaya. Just a minute, could you confirm if you can see my screen all right?
Yes.
Okay, so good morning, good evening to all. In this presentation, I'll probably be far away from policy, but maybe a bit closer to what we've been discussing, or maybe better in connection to what Sanaya is, but also maybe this topic in this presentation will address some of the points about a scientific steering group to coordinate the inputs for data and policy that was commented on just a minute ago. So in this presentation, I mean to build on the one from Monday, where I already presented the framework for ocean observing and how GOOS is coordinating sustained ocean observations using the concept of essential ocean variables. It will hopefully bring some discussion points which we could address collectively during the later part of this session. So I want to share with you some specific ideas and start a discussion on how to best use the capacity and resources of GOOS in partnership with the other existing initiatives supporting global marine monitoring, especially coordination of sampling activities. I will start where I left off on Monday by stating that GOOS would really like to offer its capacity and resources to support a collaborative effort to establish marine plastics debris as a new type of essential ocean variable. And we see this as a means to develop a global coordination of an integrated marine debris observing system, IMDOS, following the vision from the Ocean Ops 19 community white paper by Maximienko et al. And this presentation is also meant to reinforce the importance of IMDOS in successfully implementing another ambitious vision that Heidi already mentioned, which will be discussed in detail tomorrow, that of a global platform for marine litter and informing action, an initiative by UNEP and GeoBlue Planet. So on Friday, René already introduced the main concept of IMDOS as one of the initiatives we chose to set the stage for this marine litter working group during this OBPS workshop. The vision of IMDOS laid out collectively by some of you already attending the different workshop sessions this week. It's very comprehensive, and I encourage anyone who has not yet read the paper to get familiar with the ideas presented there. But very shortly, the vision for IMDOS, as on this slide, calls for an integration of remote sensing and in situ observations to provide spatially coherent coverage and consistent surveying time series from local to global scales. calls for use of models to continuously optimize the observing system design, but also to improve the models iteratively based on such a system. Interaction with other observing systems monitoring already physical, chemical, biological processes in the ocean on the shorelines, but also, of course, for example, the bathymetry that Matthias just mentioned. Engagement of volunteer and citizen science initiatives, establishing best practices and harmonized methodologies for the different elements of the observing system, and also enabling synthesized data to support innovative research and serve a diverse community of users. The paper actually also calls for identification of relevant essential ocean variables aside from the existing SDG indicator or CBD indicators. It's not by chance that the agenda of this Marine Litter Working Group of this workshop is well aligned with the different themes put forward by IMDOS. On Monday, we had a dedicated session on standardizing and harmonizing methodologies led by Alex and Francois. And also during the first instance of this session on global framework, we talked about whether and how to select indicators for global monitoring based on, but also going beyond the SDG indicator framework. We already had a great overview yesterday of the remote sensing approaches used to monitor marine litter, also raising specific needs and recommendations for integration with the in situ monitoring component, including citizen science initiatives that we also had a dedicated 2-hour session on yesterday in the afternoon. Later today, we will talk about the role of modeling, and tomorrow will be entirely devoted to the needs and proposed solutions for managing data for monitoring, meeting the requirements of policies. So co-organization of this workshop by Goose is an important part of our efforts to sketch an action plan for establishing a global coordination of IMDOS, a plan which should complement the existing global coordination efforts led by UNEP, GeoBlue Planet, G20, and other partners whom we would like to support with our capacity and resources. An initial draft, proposed draft action plan has so far received feedback from a few of the IMDOS white paper co-authors, as well as representing those different structures of Goose who could support its future implementation. And the idea is for the revised draft to be produced based on the outcomes and recommendations coming out of this workshop and other ongoing initiatives, and then to be presented again for wider feedback and consultation. So in this presentation, I would just like to highlight and discuss with you the proposed scope, approach, and some specific actions as outlined in the current action plan. Establishing a globally coordinated IMDOS would fill the need for a coordinated and sustained observation platform, which would also provide authoritative guidance on how to continuously enhance and optimize such a system to then ultimately provide adequate data and information on marine debris in response to diverse stakeholder needs. So this is also indicated that it would serve as a backbone structure behind the proposed construct, namely that of the global platform that Heidi mentioned. And this is also explicitly mentioned in this community white paper developed by UNEP and GeoBlue Planet on the global platform, with some quotes here on the paper. And here on this slide, you can see a very rough schematic, which is of course an incomplete landscape, that maybe illustrates a potential niche that IMDOS could fill in that regard. Implementation of IMDOS is of course a great challenge. One of the questions I would like to ask in this presentation is how we would move forward with establishing the right governance structure to make the IMDOS vision a reality. We have of course many intense international efforts supporting global coordination of marine litter, all of which share a common agenda, are committed to sharing comparable measurements, and which are already mutually enforcing their activities. However, establishing IMDOS as a suitable backbone organization as could be seen, filling the niche in the current landscape, would require a dedicated coordinating body with some staff and specific sets of skills to serve as such a backbone. Regardless of what the optimal governing construct for IMDOS could be, it is probably clear that it should fall under the umbrella of UNEP and its initiatives. So with this and other questions in mind, the proposed draft action plan developed by GOOS to implement IMDOS would set the following objectives: to develop marine debris as a new type of EOV, focused on identifying the globally scalable indicators and methods, while also integrating relevant requirements in the existing framework. For example, we already have the particulate matter identified as an essential ocean variable, and there are efforts, for example, around harmonizing protocols and methods on existing ship-based and fixed point observation platforms. Also in relation, in collaboration with the remote sensing community through the International Ocean Color Coordination Group. So there's probably some benefits of aligning with these efforts. The next objective would be to develop best practices and harmonized methodologies based on the GASAM guidelines. And this we have discussed already a lot on Monday. Interfacing in situ and remote sensing, that's a key point in the IMDOS vision. Augmenting existing standard operating procedures for the servicing buoys, shipborne data collection, and other sustained efforts that are already being coordinated by the GOOS regional alliances or the GOOS observations coordination group. So augmenting the existing protocols with relevant marine debris survey protocols. Another idea would be to organize a science technology meeting or forum to support opportunities and investment to fast track some promising technology and acquaint existing networks on technology being developed. For example, on the fast developing field of microplastic monitoring. And the last but least, a discussion on establishing a dedicated IMDOS coordinating body. For example, an international scientific steering group, which would have an approved terms of reference in line with the needs of other efforts coordinating marine litter monitoring. In terms of the scope, the plan identifies IMDOS as such a backbone observing structure, which would provide reliable data to inform on the state of marine pollution, and maybe to some extent also in the impacts of marine life. And, the document addresses only the sea-based, perhaps only including shoreline activities. And so as such, it does not necessarily apply the entire ideal concept of IMDOS as envisioned in the white paper. And the proposed initial actions would not be able to answer all the questions which motivate maintaining a marine litter monitoring system. They would need to seek to interface, coordinate with other initiatives addressing these questions. And so we would propose that the exact scope of IMDOS would of course need to be decided by a relevant appointed coordinating or steering group. We suggest that the coordination of the IMDOS be established following the 3 pillars of the framework for ocean observing, which account for the 3 elements of ocean observations value chain: the requirement setting, so what should be measured and how; the coordination of observations, so what is being measured and how; and then the data and information product management. The use of the EOV concept, which is central to the framework for ocean observing, needs to be reconciled with the reporting requirements for SDG and CBD indicator frameworks, as was already highlighted extensively by Sanaya on Monday. However, I want to note that we do have successful examples of such harmonizing of frameworks already occurring. For example, for the partnership with the Geo Marine Biodiversity Observing Network for several of the biological and ecosystem phenomena and the related EOVs, or with the Global Ocean Acidification Network, GOAON, with respect to the equally complex phenomenon of ocean acidification, which is based on multi-platform and multidisciplinary observations. So many of the challenges which will be faced by collaborative efforts to establish a globally coordinated IMDOS could benefit from lessons learned from these examples. So referring back to a comment that Toste Tanua, co-chair of GOOS, made on Monday, I would like to give a few examples which could maybe we could learn from in particular. So the first one is the Global Ocean Acidification Observing Network, which is a collaborative international network to detect and understand the drivers of ocean acidification in estuarine, coastal, and open ocean environments, so spanning the whole continuum. The resulting impacts on marine ecosystems, and to make the information available to optimize modeling studies. Go On is an ever-growing community-based initiative which benefited early on from initial coordination and communication support from the International Ocean Carbon Coordination Project. It is currently an independent entity with a free staff project, an executive council composed of science and program representation members, and its activities are driven by a strategy and an implementation plan. And you can see on the top right corner the current sort of network of members on a global scale, and on the bottom graphic is sort of a network of coordination and the partnership established by Go On. What is important is that the Observing Network has developed its own data explorer, which is a portal providing access and visualization to ocean acidification data and data synthesis products being collected around the world from a wide range of sources, including moorings, research cruises, autonomous platforms, and fixed point time series. This also includes information about data collected by both sustained and ad hoc research operations. So the current ongoing work is to also ensure that data from national monitoring efforts, reporting according to the SDG 14.3.1 framework, are also streamlined through this portal, making it a central hub of information on this complex and global phenomenon. So I see a lot of parallels between what the Go On has developed and, for example, what UNEP and Geo Blue Planet would like to propose for the global framework. A similar scale, a much smaller scale and complexity, but nevertheless very inspiring example comes from the formation of a global ocean macroalgal observing network, GOMON in short. This was established very recently in October last year, within just 3 years of selecting macroalgal canopy and composition as an essential ocean variable. This group is already developing standard operating protocols for 3 methods used globally: visual surveys, remote sensing, and autonomous underwater vehicles. It's interesting to note that harmonization and unified streaming of data into a common platform, in this case, the Ocean Biodiversity Information System, OBIS, was the driving force behind the process of establishing this formal network. The governance structure adopted was based on the recommended collective impact model. And here we again see the GOMON really playing the role of such a backbone structures behind other existing initiatives. And here an international steering committee with terms of reference was established with the purpose to provide leadership in the development of a global macroalgal monitoring network, but at the same time to provide advice on best practices and technologies. So regardless of the approach or the governance structure that would be chosen to pursue the vision of IMDOS, I'd like to say on behalf of GOOS that we would like to offer our resources as an opportunity to set up IMDOS coordination, ideally over the next 2 to 3 years time frame. The opportunity for us to contribute to the process comes from a European Horizon 2020 project, EuroSea. The resources available within the project are of course very small compared to the needs of IMDOS. Therefore, we are keen on discussing during this workshop and follow-up conversations with UNEP, Geo Blue Planet, G20, and anyone interested in implementing the vision of IMDOS to better align these efforts. And I think that the UN Ocean Decade for Sustainable Development is, of course, a unique opportunity to come together and perhaps lay out a plan for actions which would ensure a collective impact. So just towards the end, I want to give a few more specifics on the actions which we would like to propose in this action plan for IMDOS. The first one was to publish the first version of a marine plastics debris EOV specification sheet. This would offer an opportunity to summarize the observing requirements for marine debris as an EOV, including prioritizing which parameters or indicators to measure on a global scale, and if possible, specify what coverage, resolution, and accuracy is needed. And this is already could benefit from ongoing studies made by the modeling and the remote sensing community. A list of coordinated monitoring efforts on regional to global scale, as well as those at concept stage, which could be identified as emerging vital elements of the future IMDOS. List key established data streams, databases, and information synthesis products that would be recommended. and a list of monitoring guidelines, best practices, and if available by then, any SOPs among other reference documents. So it would really be a sort of a summary document in that sense. Another action is to determine the priority for addressing best practices and standardization of the methods recommended for global monitoring in line with recommendations from the SAMP. So I think this could really benefit from the outcomes and follow-ups from this workshop and the existing sessions we already had on the prior days and also today. This could also consider existing coordinated observing network and program protocols, for example, the SOUP for Ships of Opportunity, co-developed with similar initiatives leading to expansion of current sustained efforts. A good example of that comes from a SCORE working group PEOPS for water sampling on ship-based and fixed-point open ocean observatories. So developing and promoting the use of best practices would benefit from the collaboration with Ocean Best Practices System, which could include, for example, coordination of technical workshops dedicated to further harmonization and standardization of the individual recommended indicators. Another action proposed would be an analysis of feasibility and cost of adding a marine debris component to established or emerging globally coordinated observing networks. This could include repeat hydrography surveys run by GoShip, volunteer observing ships run by VOS or SOUP, maintenance of buoys, or operations of fixed point observatories coordinated by ocean science. And in the biology space, the Global Alliance for Continuous Plankton Surveys, GACS, could also play a role. A recent model of such analysis is provided by a report from the SCORE Working Group 154 with very detailed recommendations for what it takes to add plankton measurements on a GoShip program with relevance to also other ongoing expeditions. And this working group is preparing a subsequent report with recommendations for fixed point observations on ocean sites. Such an action could also address the issue of current lack of formal contact points and documents providing guidelines on technical specifications or cost estimates for yachts, both racing and recreational, which are willing to support sampling and delivering data to international databases such as EMODNet. So this goes back to the example put forward by Sanae of the IOC IMOCA collaboration with the sailing community. Finally, to go back to recommendations from the second session on Monday led by Francois and Alex, I think that selecting those parameters or indicators which we want to measure on a global scale, considering both their ability to answer key questions and their feasibility, is a necessary prerequisite for taking further steps in setting up IMDOS. A possible short list of these was discussed on Monday, and I hope we can also pick this discussion up again today. For example, building up on the more details that Sanaya provided on the potential to include microplastics as an essential ocean, as a component of the essential ocean variable. It was also what they recommended on Monday, what Francois already followed up on today, that technical workshops are needed to be convened to make progress on global harmonization of methods and standards associated with monitoring of these or other indicators. So there, from what I understand, there are already excellent ideas and plans on how to move forward with such work. It could be that for some of these indicators, which require broad-scale operations, other organizations, including GOOSE, could provide valuable coordination support. So, and if this is how we can best contribute to implementation of IMDOS, we would be happy to do so. So with that, I would be happy to take any questions or see whether people are interested in discussing any of the points raised here further on. Thank you.
Thank you, Arthur. So I cannot see there any. So for no one. If not, can I ask quickly answer the Alex question toward my presentation, so that people can, have a time to ask you some question. Is it okay? So let me read Alex's question about microplastic as a possible essential ocean valuable. So his question, I read his question. So, so his question is, we need to understand the story floating microplastic tell us. The floating microplastic are composed essentially by low density plastics, PE and PP, so which may comprise a pellet and the microbeads, but mainly secondary microplastic generated by the fragmentation of larger items. Cross fiber are largely underrepresented since they sink and accumulate in the seafloor. Thus, floating microplastic mostly represent the resultant of the long or medium-term process. Considering that microplastic floating changes due to the biofouling, particles tend to sink in a medium long term. So sea surface is a temporary accumulation compartment of microplastic. So that numbers are not supposed to indefinitely increase because it is not a final sink accumulation zone. However, if leaching of plastic to the ocean reduces, if it is supposed to, the number of the floating microplastic will also decrease. But this response is not immediate. There is a time lag of some year. This should be more precisely defined. And thank you, Alex, for the elaborating question. So the reason that Japan, and I also picked up the surface microplastic as a possible essential ocean valuable to measure in a global scale is basically because of its feasibility for the temporal, possible spatial and temporal coverage for the global scale. So if, of course, as I said in a presentation, to identify what the surface microplastics tell is very important because we have to break down, we have to think about what does that concentration means. But so I think, as I said in my presentation, so surface microplastic can be used as a proxy of something. So that by combining the surface microplastic data with other data, other detailed data such as water column or sediment microplastic, and also the impact of the more breakdown of the type of the plastic, but those data are not really globally available. So as always, we should know that what that microplastic concentration tell. Yes, of course, as you said. There also the second point is that it could be the proxy of the time change, time spatial and the time temporal change in the global scale. Yes, and one of the maybe it's a good advantage is that now the legislation of the plastics is very in the global community or the government, the nation set the legislation and for the reducing the plastics. So the monitoring the surface microplastic, even if that is only the part of the microplastic in all the ocean, could be the kind of the proxy of the measure, the improvement, or maybe not improvement, improvement of that, the influence, impact or effect of those measures. Of course, as you said, and I think it's take a time to see the difference, but still the ocean monitoring, and I think ocean monitoring should be done in a longer time scale, like 5 years and 10 years. So I think still there's also possibility for the surface microplastic as a proxy or the temporal change, and also the impact of effectiveness with a measure. So I hope this is the answer to your question.
Thank you, Sanai.
And okay, there is a question from Peter Kocher, and this is for Alex. So important to see discussion of the data standard. So looking at how different data seeds and drone, satellite, AI can provide data to platform, and then how that data can be shared to support analysis. Is there any further work and standards with other relevant observation networks to ensure that data can also be easily shared between these to help build holistic data pictures? So I think this is a question to Arthur.
Okay. Yeah. I just saw that Peter clarified that it's for me. So yes, I think depending on which community we're talking about, focusing on which platform or which type of essential ocean variable, there are of course efforts about harmonizing and standardizing the best practices and methodologies. Typically, this has been focused on platforms. So, for example, for inorganic carbon measurements, which require really high quality for climate applications, there were separate standard operating procedures developed for the different platforms. And now there's, at least in Goose, there's efforts to try and harmonize these for the same parameters, so that the data obtained from the different platforms and different methodologies could be brought together in a more synthetic way for producing synthesis products that could then better inform the needs of the policies. So I know of these examples from the biogeochemistry domain, certainly from the physics domain. I think for biology and ecosystems, this is still very much in early stages. So a lot of these ongoing efforts, I think, could benefit from discussions with the marine litter community, because the approaches and the methods are similar, and it might just be a matter of adjusting existing standard protocols so that they can also fit the needs of a future extension that would consider marine litter observations. So I don't know if that answers your point. But otherwise, I can point to other people who are a lot more qualified to provide information on this.
Sorry, Anna. Also on the chatting window, I see the some like a comment, but this is a comment about the micro proxy of the surface microplastics service. So I think we should go to the general discussion. Is it okay now? So if it's okay, I can share my screen to show you the discussion point of today. Oops. So can you see my slide showing?
Yes.
Okay, so the problem is I cannot see the chatting window. Oh, okay, I got it. So the first discussion point is how can we link the SDG priority indicators and monitoring variables? So Is there a gap between them? If yes, how can we fill the gap? What framework actions are needed to ready it available to making them? So in the left-hand side is a global sub-indicator for SDG 40.1 and 1. So then there is some level from the during the presentation on the first day. So the global indicator is like sub-indicator is like this, and also the regional indicator is like this, and there are the two, and also there is another level of the national indicator. But on the other hand, in the section 2 recommendation is show the possible shortlisted indicator for the global scale monitoring, such as the beach litter, seafloor litter, microplastic, and ingested litter. But all those items is in the SDG indicator scheme. All those items is not reach the criteria for the global indicator in terms of the lack of the harmonization or something. So our question is, how can we level up or rank up, scale up of these possible, the example indicator to be the global indicator which meet the SDG indicator criteria? I cannot see the is anyone want to say something?
So there's a comment from Alex in the chat.
Sorry,
Alex,
that.
would you like to, is that related to Sanaya's question or?
Yes, the last comment, the other comments are related to the previous discussion. So no, I think we need a coupled bottom-up and top-down approach to coordinate data generation and sharing, and also standardization of sampling protocols, so that local or national teams or subnational teams are trained to conduct sampling in an official way. So I mean, we may have a very strong or clear link with state governments or national governments, so that we may include generation of such data into their protocols. They are already existing protocols for other things, like beach quality. Here in Brazil, we have beach quality being evaluated periodically, weekly, so that we can include this type of things. So there's a need of a coordination, but also a need to include this into the official practices, so that it will be produced forever, hopefully.
Thank you.
I don't know if it was in that direction you were asking us. But,
no. It's just so I mean, we even take any opinion or any comment about the random question or comment. So please say something. Don't be shy. And so I would like to ask the opinion from the UNEP side about this gap, and if still, how do you think, Heidi, if you're still there?
Yeah, I'm here. Could you put back the slide? Yeah. So I think there are a few things. So there will be a presentation tomorrow on the whole pilot that we did, integrating different data sources with IBM, getting to kind of the end goal of having a number of items of beach litter, for example, per square meter. So that's just one example of integration of data. And I think there is an opportunity to go much further. I mentioned that in the G20 meeting before, about like first breaking down what we need to do or where we think the priorities are, and then finding kind of centers of excellence almost, where then if the Japanese government are interested to take on microplastics, great, then that's a big, you know, area of work. And then there are many other centers. So if we can identify and map, we're trying to do that to some extent with the multi-stakeholder digital platform that I'll present on tomorrow too. And by doing that, we could move a bit at least on some of the items under the towards standard sampling protocols in the short term. In the long term, we have to ensure that the sampling protocols are strengthened. And I really appreciate the idea that Arthur mentioned related to also adding marine litter related aspects into existing kind of observation systems or initiatives that are doing other type maybe of non-marine litter specific monitoring or work. For the indicators work, I think there is an opportunity for connecting between, for example, we have SDG, is it 11.6.1, looking at the amount of environmentally sound managed waste. And if you then look at the connectivity between that and what's then in the environment on beach litter, I think there are a lot of aspects where potential indicators could come in to fill that gap. But I wouldn't be able to outline right now kind of what that would be. I think that the idea of having some technical workshops on this going forward is another area. And to some extent, we hope that the assessment that we've been doing on sources, pathways, and hazards might be able to inform a bit of that discussion on the indicators.
Thank you. And so I have been, I have been working in the oceanographers community, and also I'm a gooseler. So always our focus is the global ocean. So we take the ocean as a global, but when it comes to the SDG indicator or the SDG initiative about the ocean things, so for me, most of the states, focus on to submitting the national report for the national indicator. Most of the reports, it seems to me, the states are more interested in the reporting the national indicator achievement, also regional indicator achievement. So I just wonder how the policy side is really interested in to take the global issue like marine plastic pollution as the true transboundary issue as a serious. Do you have any opinion about that? Or just maybe I'm wrong, my impression was wrong?
I missed the last part of it, just related to how to take what seriously, sorry?
So I just wonder if the policy side, in the high level policy side, or maybe the high level policy maker of the states who participated in the SDG, interested in the truly global transboundary issue of the marine plastics.
Yes, there is a lot of interest for that, and I think that's why we are coming together, or countries are coming together through the UN Environment Assembly to try to discuss what's needed to address and solve the issue, acknowledging fully that there's a lot of problems in areas beyond national jurisdiction. So it's nothing really that can be solved at the national level alone, or even at the regional. So I think what we're trying to do there, and tomorrow we think we should have Eric presenting is also to try and highlight that interconnectivity and highlight that even if you do take measures at the national level, then you can't influence or control everything that's reaching your borders. In the case of a country, you may be able to influence or manage, let's say, a certain portion of it, but then you also have contributions from countries within your region that are reaching your shores, and also contributions from countries outside your region. So if we are able to break that down a bit more to really take home the message of the need for that also regional collaboration that is global, then I think we would be quite successful in taking this further. But it's already at the highest level of interest, I feel, with this topic, both within policymakers, but also the world.
Thank you very much. And anything else? Someone want to say anything? Then, if nothing, I leave this slide and go to next one. So we're going to talk about the key steps to streamline global marine debris or marine litter data value chain, from monitoring variables, for example, essential ocean variables, data sharing, indicator development to the port policies. So what is the challenge in each component? For implementation of global monitoring, what is the role of GOOSE? I'm afraid my internet connection is unstable. Can you still follow me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And as for implementation of global monitoring, what is the role of GOOSE, UNEP, and other regional programs? And what is the role of IMDOS? How UNEP and GOOSE can achieve greater collective impact by jointly supporting implementation of IMDOS as a type of backbone organization? I think people need a coffee time, maybe.
So Sanaya, if I could just supplement the question here. I mean, the IMDOS concept has been put forward by a really large community, including remote sensing and modeling experts who have the best interest to provide information that is needed. And it is apparent that there is a lack of that there's a need for an organized construct that would better integrate the different approaches so that the data that is needed can actually supply the concept of a global platform that would then inform the policymakers and so on. So I was wondering if anybody in the room has some thoughts on how to really move forward with IMDOS, or is it a purely scientific construct that it's too difficult to implement at this stage? Francois, you have a comment, please?
Yes, please. I just would like to raise the issue of, having different initiatives separately. IMDOS is one of these, and it's relying on the scientific community typically when monitoring actually is based on environmental approaches with a high demand. But the language are completely different. And when we have to consider harmonization, it's also harmonization of the different, of the vocabulary and, all the context of global monitoring, because otherwise we may, lose some of the, potential actors in.
Thank you. So if I could pick up on that, Francois, how do you see a solution to this?
When we start on harmonizing, that will be part of the process. So terms such as EOVs, for instance, and are typically from oceanographers and marine scientists and so on, and it's very fine because they do have the scientific experience to address the issue. But then regular monitoring, the people who are, collecting data, they are not familiar with this kind of concept approaches and so on. And so both will have to be merged in some days, And I think it's quite important to fix that issue from the beginning. Otherwise, some will not be able to follow. For people in charge of monitoring from states, for instance, regular counting beaches and so on, they will not understand typically what an EOV is. And you understand my point. It's quite important to have a common language somewhere. And it's not a point, an issue to be solved today for sure. But from the beginning, it will have to be considered. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. So using the common language is very important, and besides of the less use of acronym, and also the important is storytelling, as Alex already pointed out.
Yeah, I think the issue of taking the data and making that relevant to others that are not scientists and have perhaps little familiarity with a lot of the scientific and technical issues, but that are to make decisions or decide on way forwards for countries or cities or other stakeholders. I think that is one of the challenges. So there's just, it's not impossible to overcome. It's just to kind of plan ahead when we are doing activities on what the form of what we are generating will take, so that it's very clear and for who that is and for which priority it is to be kind of guiding. And I think the monitoring guidelines that GESAM passed in chapter 10, there is an overview of what type of priority issues are there, what type of data approaches or monitoring approaches could be taken to collect the information relevant to that particular policy concern. And then also to some extent we could discuss how to best package that information.
Thank you. And also this discussion of this session is very relevant to the session 4, which will take place tomorrow. So if I can ask, I think Emily is there, and see the past author of the white paper, the white paper. So could you please, if you're available, could you please give us a comment about this discussion point? Is there anything?
Sure. So at the session tomorrow, we will give an overview of the white paper we produced. And so this paper gives an overview of some of the existing technologies that are available for monitoring marine litter and the readiness levels of them for being implemented in an operational basis, as well as a summary of some existing global data platforms that could potentially be leveraged, as well as some of the key components for a global information system for marine litter. And then we also have summaries of some of the indicators available in that paper. And so I will give an overview of that, and then we will have a colleague from IBM who can give an introduction to some of the pilot work that they've been doing with the citizen science data.
Okay, thank you very much. And I think so that white paper is very comprehensive and summarizes all the the effort of the harmonization and also the data availability, existing data deposits. And but one thing I think probably next time we should add, we should add some information to that the current white paper. Is maybe the landscape of the existing monitoring program. for example, for the the monitoring program who could be the party of the IMDOS. So that's what I thought about white paper.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that that's a good point and something that we didn't touch on in the current draft. So certainly, I think that that would be a helpful thing to address in the paper.
And anything else? So what is a action point with a of the action point with a high priority for us to the community? Besides the data communication.
Sanai, if I can have a comment, I mean, to me, I think a point is that there's probably, like what Francois mentioned, that there are parallel efforts, both aiming at integration of observations of marine litter. On one hand, they're more scientifically driven, which could be better aligned with the needs of the policymakers who currently rely on the regular monitoring efforts. So maybe the action point here is to make sure that these two parallel efforts are better streamlined, and maybe that the level on which the streamlining should occur is around the methods and best practices, so that the data produced from the two areas are eventually going to be compatible and interoperable. So this is how I understand sort of the conclusion from this conversation, but please correct me if I'm wrong, anyone.
Yes, I would agree with that, in that the effort to look at the data is looking at how some of it is currently formatted and where it's being hosted. But certainly as we develop the IMDOS, we want to look at how the data is going to be formatted and compiled so that it's interoperable and intercomparable. And so I think that that's a goal at looking at the intersection of those two activities.
Yeah, Francois speaking. I think that it will be easy to have institution providing data directly when it's more science, a scientific approach, I would say. But I mean, for regular monitoring, that will be probably agreed by states first, and this is a very formal processes, and this is the reason for what I mean. Having UNEP to manage that through the regional sea convention is an important way to gather the data. So it will work well with regular monitoring data from regular monitoring, and I mean gathering all of them from databases and so on. That's a way. But I mean for I would say scientific approach, I mean using ship opportunities and collecting data and so on. That may just be an agreement from the different in common project. That could be possible to start also.
Okay, so we still have about 7-8 minutes, so we should go to the next discussion point. So this is the ocean best practice workshop. So we require to give them the feedback, the recommendation of the ocean best practice. So how can we effectively use the existing resources of the ocean best practice repositories? Are they useful for constructing the action plan of marine debris working group? Or what can we expect to get out of the ocean best practice workshop, this workshop? Any plans for follow-up discussion after this workshop? Do we have? So my quick impression is most of the guideline and the methodology we discussed during this workshop is already on the ocean best practice repositories. So in that meaning, we already used it, but what can we expect more than that?
I think we need to put some pressures on the actors. I mean, if you have to start on global monitoring, you have to fund it and so on, then you will probably go more in priorities and to do at best, I would say. And it's something like we must, how to say that, maybe formalize the things somewhere, you know. And I know that the processes are very long, but once it will be agreed, then I mean we can start technically, I would say. And this is the point at the moment. We're just not just discussing because there is a general process behind. But hello, hello.
I have noise. Oh, okay. Go ahead, Francis.
Okay, so I think we must formalize the things. It's something like get an agreement from institution and so on, so that we start it and it be included in different project programs and so on. So it's, I mean, well advanced within UNEP, it's true, and also, I mean, the regional conventions, action plans, and but we must go, I mean, more practically, I would say, and decide and go then and follow on them.
Thank you. Anything else?
Maybe shall we have a meeting planned for the next UN Ocean that is planned next year, something like that, so that we can agree and formalize the things there. We'll have more data, more information about who can support and so on. Maybe some meetings before, but so that we know where to go then after, organize the work, you know.
Yes.
And this is Emily. I think it would be helpful to have some type of plan in terms of what is actually going to be produced in terms of protocols, and if they're going to be registered in the ocean best practices or through the regional state programs.
Sorry, and my connection is not really good, so I lost some part of your conversation, but I hope everyone could hear.
Yeah, so to follow up on what Emily said, I mean, I think this relates to also to the recommendations from the session on the second part on Monday, where we agreed that we need some technical meetings dedicated to making progress on the best practices or protocols for the individual indicators that could be shortlisted for global upscaling. So I guess it will be important to communicate about the organization of these workshops so that the relevant actors are there, including both the scientific and environmental initiatives. If for example, there are different methods beyond the traditional monitoring that could contribute to future data on a given indicator. That's my home take from this conversation.
Okay. Thank you very much. And I think we had only a couple of minutes left. So I think it's a time to wrap up. And could I give put back the mic to Arthur and for the ending remark?
Sure. So thank you very much, Sanaya, for leading and moderating today's sessions, and to you and Heidi for the presentations, and to all for participating. You will have access to the recording and to the notes probably sometime tomorrow if you'd like to share any of this with your colleagues who could not participate. And we already invite you to the following sessions today afternoon on the best practices for modeling approaches to supplement marine litter observations, and tomorrow, as already a few times advertised, sessions on the global data platform. So thanks a lot, everybody, and have a good afternoon, evening, or morning, depending where you are. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Good night.
Good night.